The squat is the king of strength exercises when it comes to becoming a stronger lifter. It's also one of the best muscle builders you can do, helping you build not only your legs, but your entire body. In this video, I'm ranking the best and worst squat variations, and this is purely my opinion as a coach and as a lifter. We are going from S tier, the absolute best, all the way down to F tier, which stands for fail. At the end, I'll tell you which variation I've been spamming over the past few years to bring my squat up to 300 kilos. But first we need some criteria. For a variation to reach S tier, it needs to score highly in 3 categories. Number 1 is carryover. How much does this actually improve your competition squat? For 99% of powerlifters, that's going to be the low bar squat. Criteria number 2 is progressibility. Can you load it and progress it and get stronger at it over the months and years? And criteria number 3 is safety and efficiency. Is it practical to use? Does it give you a good return without unnecessary complexity, fatigue, or risk? And keep in mind, a variation doesn't have to have the most carryover for everyone to be highly ranked. Exercises might be S tier for a specific type of lifter, but not for everyone. We are taking more of a general approach. Also, see-through S tier variations are considered good in my opinion. It's just a matter of priority for me. Usually from S tier to C tier are the exercises we like to often use in our programs. And D through F tier are exercises that I would mostly avoid if your main goal is to improve your powerlifting squat or your competition squat. Let's get into the rankings. The first squat variation we're going to talk about is goblet squat. The goblet squat, where you hold the weight in front of you, is a great exercise. For beginners, fantastic. For learning depth bracing or warming up, fantastic. But for someone advanced who wants to squat 250 plus kilos, you are going to run out of weight pretty quickly. The carryover is good early on because it teaches you how to squat properly, but it becomes less specific as you get stronger. It also forces a more upright torso. It's not very progressible because the weight you can hold becomes a limiting factor. From a safety and efficiency standpoint, it's very practical and easy to use. And if you are a complete beginner with no squat experience, this is easily A tier. For everyone else, D tier. The front squat. The front squats build your quads, upper back, and core stability. They're an incredible exercise if your goal is Olympic weightlifting. Weightlifters need a strong front rack position after the clean, but for raw powerlifters, I don't think they are worth prioritizing. For the average gym goer or powerlifter, the setup, mobility, and technique usually become the limiting factor before the legs do. You can use alternatives like a cross-arm grip or straps instead of a front rack, but if you don't need to train that position specifically, you are adding complexity without getting much extra out of it. The carryover is okay if you're already experienced with front squats, but I think there are plenty of other squat variations that will improve your low bar squat or competition squat more effectively. They are also less progressible for most lifters because your upper back and core usually become the limiting factor long before your legs do. And from a safety and efficiency standpoint, they are okay, but they're not very efficient for a powerlifter. They require more mobility, more technical proficiency, and there is good use for them when you have limited equipment available, but many other alternatives exist. For me, D tier for powerlifting, and if you high bar squat, I would put them around C and D tier. The high bar squat is one of the most famous variations which weightlifters use, and most people that start to learn the squat, they first learn how to high bar. You usually stay more upright, get more knee travel, and build a ton of quad strength. The movement is very similar to the low bar squat, so the carryover is pretty high. It can be especially good for long leg lifters who struggle to stay balanced between the squats and the posterior chain. However, the main downside is that it's much more leg dominant and less back dominant than the low bar squat. A lot of powerlifters struggle to build and maintain upper back tension because of the bar position. It's also usually paired with a closer stance, so the movement pattern drifts a little further away from your competition squat. It's incredibly progressible since you can load it just like a normal squat and progressively overload it for years. From a safety and efficiency standpoint, it's stable, you don't need crazy setups, and it gives you a lot of training stimulus without adding unnecessary complexity. Overall, I'm giving this A tier. However, if this is your competition style and you are sure you wouldn't benefit more from a low bar squat, I would bump this up to S tier. Zercher squats. Zercher squats feel like you're being punished for your sins. Your arms hurt, your soul hurts, and they absolutely destroy your upper back and core. But the limiting factor is usually your ability to survive the set, not your legs. The carryover to the low bar squat is pretty limited. They do train the squat pattern and build a strong upper back and core, but the position is very different from a competition squat. They are also not very progressible for most lifters, and from a safety standpoint and efficiency standpoint, they are not ideal. They are a very unstable movement, especially for beginners and intermediates, and there are usually more efficient ways to train the same qualities. They can have some use for athletes like wrestlers who benefit from backward loading and front-loaded strength. For powerlifting, I would mostly avoid them. You can get similar benefits with less suffering from options like back extensions, front-loaded carries, or other squat variations. For me, D tier. Belt squat. The next variation isn't technically a squat, but it's also one of the best ways to get more leg work in without loading your spine. If you are dealing with a low back injury or you just want to reduce back fatigue, you can still train your legs with a movement that's very similar to the squat. The carryover is really good because you are still training the squat pattern and building your legs without adding more fatigue to your back. It's also highly progressible. You can load it heavily, push it hard, and recover from it well, making it an excellent accessory for powerlifters. From a safety and efficiency standpoint, it's fantastic. The only downside is that a bad belt can pull you into awkward positions or squeeze your cojones. Apart from that, it's one of the most practical ways to get extra squat volume in, and for me, it's S tier. A tempo squat. Tempo squats are used to slow down different parts of the movement, but here I'm just talking about tempo eccentrics, going down. Controlling the way down, usually that's anywhere from 2 to 5 seconds, and they are great for learning control, improving your balance, and teaching you to stay tight instead of dive bombing into the hole. I also think they have a place if you want a lighter training day while giving your passive structures a little bit more time to adapt to the load or to the training. And the carryover is decent because the movement is still specific to the competition squat, but the slow tempo changes the way you actually perform the lift. They are progressible, but you're never going to need to load them as heavy as a normal squat, and they are really fatiguing for the amount of weight you are lifting. From a safety and efficiency standpoint, they are great. They're a great coaching tool, but I don't think they're efficient enough to justify running year-round for most powerlifters. For me, it's B tier. The box squat. Box squat suits very similar movement pattern to the low bar squat. It's just with a limited range of motion and depending on the box height. They can be useful for targeting the first half of the squat or for keeping heavier weights in your program if you are dealing with an injury or you can't squat to full depth for any reason. The carryover is pretty specific. They have their use, but because you are not training the full range of motion, I don't think they transfer as well as a regular competition squat or a post squat. They're definitely progressible since you can load them really heavy and they're an overload movement. From a safety and efficiency standpoint, they're generally fine, but there are some downsides. If the box moves or you slam down into it instead of staying in control, they can be a bit sketchy, and for me this one has some very specific use, so I'll put it in C tier. Bulgarian split squats. Everyone hates this. If you love this, you are probably a psycho. They build your quads, glutes, improve stability, fix left to right imbalances, and humble absolutely everyone. The downside is they don't perfectly replicate the squat pattern and they don't load the spine like a squat does. However, if you focus on keeping your chest up, getting a full range of motion, and allowing good knee travel, they can be an incredible accessory. The carryover is better than people think because building unilateral strength can help your squat, especially if you have imbalances or weaknesses out of the hole. They're very effective, but the progressibility is where they lose points because once you get stronger, grip strength often becomes a limiting factor before legs do, and you can use straps to remove the grip limitation, but also makes the setup more complicated and awkward. I would originally put this in S tier as a muscle builder, but for improving the squat specifically, A tier. Reverse band squats. Reverse band do the opposite of bands and chains. They help you out of the bottom and gradually unload as you stand up, so you are handling more weight through the top portion of the squat, and they can be useful for getting used to having heavier weights on your back or on workout, but in general, I'm not a big fan. I don't really use them for coaching for a few reasons. The carryover is only okay in my opinion, and they make the hardest part of the squat the whole much easier, so I don't really see the point for most row lifters trying to build their competition squat. They are reasonably progressible, but I don't think that makes up for the lack of specificity and amount of fatigue you will build up, because they're an overload movement, exposing yourself to more weight than you are capable of, like a spotter helping you press the bar when bench pressing. From a safety and efficiency standpoint, they're also not great in my opinion. Not everyone can set them up properly. They take time to adjust the workout, and the rack can actually feel heavier and pull you in odd directions. And while it's uncommon, there is also a small risk of the band snapping, so for me, I would put them in D tier. But I have seen results from them a few times, so I bumped them up to C tier. Safety bar squat. The invention of the safety bar solved a lot of problems for powerlifting and fitness in general. It's very similar to front squat pattern, but you don't nearly need as much mobility or technique to stabilize the bar. It's also great for athletes with shoulder pain or restricted shoulder mobility because it allows you to keep squatting while taking stress off the shoulders. You are actually using it right now with one of our athletes who gets elbow pain during the low bar squat, and we're using it to keep training while we fix the issue and eventually return to the competition squat in a few weeks. The carryover is really good. Depending on the lifter, a high quality safety bar that can be loaded properly can be an amazing variation for building the upper back, core, and quads. They're also very progressible since you can load it heavy and progressively overload it over a long time. From a safety and efficiency standpoint, it solves a lot of problems, especially for lifters with mobility restrictions. Honestly, this has a strong case for A tier. Overhead squats. You don't see this very often, but let's just put this in for the content. Overhead squats for anyone other than weightlifters or CrossFit athletes, these just aren't worth the hassle. They require a lot of mobility and stability, and your legs barely ever become the limiting factor. The carryover to a low bar squat is extremely low, and for most powerlifters, the time spent learning the movement would be better invested in almost any other squat variation. They are also not very progressible because technique, mobility, and stability become the limiting factors long before your legs do. From a safety and efficiency standpoint, they are not a great choice either. If you don't practice the movement regularly, they are a bit riskier than they need to be, and you simply can't load them heavily enough to justify the extra complexity. For powerlifters and casual gym goers, they might help you get a bit more upper back awareness, but that's about it. For me, F tier. Beltless squat. Beltless squats are the exact same movement as your competition squat, just without a belt. And compared to deadlifts, I think that taking the belt off has a much bigger impact on the squat. You won't be able to load them quite as heavy, and if you lose your brace under heavier weights, the injury risk is a bit higher. And the carryover is still excellent because you are performing your competition squat, and beltless work can also build confidence under the bar and teach you to stay tight without relying on the belt as a crutch. They are reasonably progressible, although you will naturally be limited by the lighter loads compared to a belted squat. And from a safety and efficiency standpoint, they have pros and cons like everything else. They can help you learn to brace because you get immediate feedback on whether you are creating enough pressure. But on the other hand, mistakes with your brace are punished more when the weight gets heavy because you have nothing to catch you. For me, B tier. Banded or chain squats. Bands and chains use accommodating resistance to make the lockout of the squat harder while keeping the bottom relatively challenging. It can help you become stronger through the top of the lift, teach you to stay in a position as the weight gets heavier, and build confidence grinding through heavy reps. The carryover can be decent, especially if you are an equipped lifter or you are training with conjugate style methods where accommodating resistance is used much more intentionally. They are also fairly progressible since you can gradually increase the bar weight or the amount of band tension or chain weight over time. From a safety and efficiency standpoint, though they are not ideal, they're a bit of a hassle to set up and they are less stable during the workout and re-rack. And while it's uncommon, there's always a small risk of a band snapping. For most raw lifters, there are simpler approaches and not everybody has equipment to train this. I like them, but I wouldn't say you definitely need them to get stronger. So I'd go C tier. Pin squats. Pin squats are the variation where you rest the bar on the safeties and start each rep from a dead stop. The dead stop usually being at depth or slightly below your sticking point. They are great for building strength and exposing positional weaknesses since there's no stretch reflex to help you out. It might take a few tries to get the pin height exactly where you want it, and the setup can be a bit annoying. The carryover is definitely there, especially if you struggle to produce force from a dead stop, and they're also progressible, although they're usually limited by the awkward setup and the fact that you'll use lighter weights than your competition squat. From a safety and efficiency standpoint, they are not my favorite, and setting them up takes time if you don't know the equipment, and every rack is a little bit different. And if the pin height is off by even a small amount, the exercise can change quite a bit. I'd put this in C tier. Post squat. Post competition squats are absolutely brutal. Removing the stretch reflex forces you to stay tight and maintain your position and actually produce force out of the bottom instead of bouncing your way up. They're amazing if you lose tightness in the hole, you lose your balance, or just need to get better feel for bracing and consistently hitting depth. The carryover is S tier because you are still performing your exact competition squat, you are just making it harder in the hole. They are also really safe and efficient, and they are easy to fit into almost any training block, and they are definitely progressible, although you won't be loading them quite as heavy as your competition squat. Even so, they are easy to progressively overload over time, and as a small tip, you can use post squats in a variation to regulate the amount of weight you will need if you don't want to go too heavy. For example, for a secondary squat. For me, it's easy S tier. The low bar squat, this is the competition lift for most, and the lift powerlifters are trying to improve over the years. Nothing has more carryover because it's the movement itself, unless you high bar, of course. With low bar, you learn to stay tight, brace properly, use your hips efficiently, and move the heaviest loads possible. If you are practicing exactly how you compete, and I run this all year round. It's also infinitely progressible, and every serious powerlifting program is built around making these lifts stronger, and there's no ceiling to how long you can keep progressing with this. From a safety and efficiency standpoint, unless you are dealing with shoulder mobility issues or pain, this is the most efficient use of your training. If your goal is to squat more low bar, nothing gives you a better return on investment. This has to be S tier. If your competition squat was high bar instead of low bar, I would actually bump low bar down to A tier. It would still have great carryover and be highly progressible, but it wouldn't be the exact skill you are competing in. So that's my ranking for the squat variations. Some of these are absolute peak, and some are overrated, and some should stay in whatever video you convince the people to use them. I really like high specificity for primary and secondary squats, and most of the time I program competition squats. I've been spamming low bar for the past few years with little barbell variation involved, and it has brought my squat over up to 300 kilos. Now I want to hear your opinion. If you had to pick one squat variation, which one would it be? Or if you just want to roast my list, let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, leave a like and a subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.